let's try starting streaming again. See if this one actually takes. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. Had a little bit of boomer tech issues. Go ahead and cue up the intro song again, and we will just start over like we've been intending to do this the whole time.
Yeah, we'll just continue like this is going well.
And mute the stream in the background.
Yeah, I just realized.
All right. Hello, everyone, again, and welcome back to the Gospel of Comics. I'm your host, the Church of Failure, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Ayrton McCartney.
For real this time.
Absolutely. One more time's the charm. Sorry for being a little bit late. Being a dad, occasionally you have to wrangle small children who are doing everything in their power to kill you.
Or each other.
Most of the time, just you though. Like they pop each other in the face occasionally, but really it's you that they try to be homicidal with. Today is the Mother's Day special. We'll be covering Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, issues 1 through 7, and these I believe were 1995 to 1997 or 98, and they were created by Jonan Vasquez, who did the Invader Zim series, which more people are probably familiar with because this was, I believe, his first published work. You'll notice that the art style is very similar. So,
yeah, definitely the first thing I noticed when I started reading them.
Now, there is a little bit of unknown lore with Jonan Vasquez that Mrs. Church is actually more keen on than I am. But apparently his mentality changed from Johnny the Homicidal Maniac to Invader Zim based on his, ideas of, I guess, entertainment and how you view entertainment, because he put this stuff out, and while this was a lot more entertaining than I initially thought it was going to be for my initial look through before my wife suggested that I read it, and I'm not just saying that because she may listen to this. I promise. She's definitely not standing beside me holding a gun to my head telling me, like the book. But no,
blink twice if you're in distress.
You can't see my camera.
That's besides the point.
But no, the whole idea of this comic, it seems like it seems very much like a first work of a 90s comic, an independent creator. The first few issues I felt like were almost stream of consciousness would be the word that I give to it, and then around issue 3 or 4 you start to get a little bit of a Lovecraftian horror to it as well.
Yeah, it was definitely very wonderfully disjointed at the beginning.
Right. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that was like adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters. It didn't flow like a normal comic book would, but that wasn't a bad thing. Like, that wasn't a negative for the book. I don't think it would have worked if it would have been a cohesive. Have several different stories intertwined with this book, and we'll just kind of look over those real quick before we jump into the actual previews. You had your main story, which was Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, and that's a story. But then you have the filler strips that fall in between the story. One being which Johnny, the main character, is a cartoonist and does a comic. There's There's another character that exists in the universe named Anguish, which is a play on anguish. You have
Yes, I thought that was fun.
yes, you have wobbly-headed Bob, which was furry, funny animals that were very strange, megalomaniac, and the wobbly-headed Bob is the only intelligent person in the universe, according to him. There's a strip called Meanwhile that you see occasionally, and it talks about true tales of human drama. And I don't know if I just missed those or just skipped over the title of them. Did you see them in your read through?
I might have skipped over the titles too.
I don't know if that was something that was only included in the trades. It's listed in the. Oh no, that was put out in Squee's wonderful big giant book of unspeakable horrors, which was a later work. There was a second series that was
Okay.
put out based on the neighbor Squee and his misadventures. So,
That has to be fun because he was probably my favorite character in the whole story.
oh yeah, well, I guess that could kind of lead us off into just kind of giving the general synopsis of the Johnny the Homicidal Maniac story, which for 7 issues is surprisingly short because of the interludes and whatnot and the stream of consciousness type writing, which I don't think is a bad thing. In these kind of
No, it definitely takes a bit to read though.
yes,
Very, very, very wordy.
well, it's very wordy, and because he did everything himself, I mean, obviously he's not a distinguished letterer, and it's a very scratchy, chaotic style that I think matches the book. And
Yes, some bits were hard to read. I had to read them over a couple times.
right, well, I mean, if you go back and flip through them a second and third time, you'll see all the little hidden messages and the gutters and the corners of the book.
Yeah, I saw some of them.
So I think we're gonna showcase a little bit of that as we kind of get to it and flip through these. But you want to start the explanation of our first introduction to Squee?
Yes, so I didn't actually notice that introduction said traumatize that neighbor. So at first I thought it was like a backstory to Johnny,
Right.
is what I thought they were going with. But so it opens with this little kid carrying some demented looking teddy bear.
Right.
Is that what that's supposed to be?
Yes. Yes. It is a teddy bear.
Okay. And he's scared and can't sleep because he hears a noise. And we find out that him and his parents just moved to this new house, and he goes to his mother's, who's laying in bed, presumably naked,
Yeah.
with her legs dangling off the bed,
Right.
and she basically says, "You're annoying me. Nothing's wrong. Don't bother your father."
You roboted a little bit there, but
So
I think what you're getting at is that basically none of these, none of the parents, neither of the parents actually seem to give two craps about Johnny or about Squee rather.
yeah,
They're just
yeah.
they're terrible parents.
Am I coming through now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The dad
Yeah.
is
So
the dad is engaged in his work and begrudges having children, and the mother is kind of worthless. Um, and I think it sets the stage and identifies with a lot of the goth scene in the early '90s when that was a thing before the emo culture came in and ruined it.
oh, that was an interesting time.
Man, wasn't it? Um, Anyway, no, it, and this is like I said, I believe the first what 7 6 7 pages. Yeah,
Yeah, something like that.
the first 7 pages, and that's about how these books are laid out. You get 7 pages of the main storyline in the beginning, and then it'll break into a mini comic, usually a what is it, Noodle Bob. We'll just pull it up here. Oh no, either Wobbly Headed Bob or what's one of the other ones that we can pull up? Happy Noodle Boy. I get the two confused.
Yeah, they're weird ass names.
Right. And Happy Noodle Boy is nothing but a stick figure, and Wobbly Headed Bob is, like I said, it's a funny animal world. But again, and these stories continue out throughout too, but there's no real synergy between them. They're almost like web comics almost, and they have nothing to do
Yeah,
with the overarching story of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. They're just fun little inter, you know, intercuts between the actual book.
right. Which they're fun. They take away from the pacing of the rest of the book.
Right.
I think I
And
would have liked. I think I would have liked them better if they were like at the end
yeah,
instead of just crammed in the middle randomly. You know.
right. But I think they're worth reading through. Like, I don't think they're worth skipping. Maybe read the main Johnny the Homicidal Maniac part and then go back and read them. But I think they're worth being read
Oh yeah, they're
because some of them are just entirely too entertaining, and it takes me back to being an angsty teenager entirely too well.
yeah, they're definitely a blast to read, especially Happy Noodle Boy. Just his manic ravings are fantastic.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second. Hit the old cough switch. But anyway, no, you had these. Telling me my internet's still crap, so that's great. If the stream cuts out, folks, like I said, we're just taking the rest of the night off. But I did want to get through these as a Mother's Day special for Mrs. Church because I really did enjoy them as I read them. It was something that I didn't think I was going to enjoy as much as I did because again I never really liked Invader Zim when it was in the height of his popularity. As I got older, it grew on me, but especially Gurr, and I think that's pretty much for everyone. But
Yeah, I mean,
oh, go ahead.
yeah. See, I loved Invader Zim as a kid. I thought it was wonderfully strange and insane. And I think about halfway through this first issue, I was like, okay, this artwork looks way too familiar. So I googled the dude and was like, oh, okay. And it kind of clicked
Right.
because at first I was like, man, this book is super super weird. And
Well,
then once I had that connection in my brain, I was like, okay, it the disjointedness was kind of nostalgic and charming to me.
right. I'm just gonna flip through to some of the other mini parts of the book before we uh, before we close out the first issue. But I do want to uh, I do want to kind of touch on the main story a little bit more because it actually does start unfolding in the first issue, but you don't really see where it's going at first because
Right.
Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. I mean, it's literally the story of a kid named Johnny who is a murderer, for lack of a better word. Anybody that just ticks him off, he will kidnap them and put them through extreme amounts of torture, and you don't really know why during the first issue. Um, do you
Yeah.
even do you even meet his internal monologue characters? in the first issue? I don't believe you do. I believe that starts in issue 2 because we meet three of my favorite
Yeah,
characters.
yeah, I believe that's issue 2.
Well,
First, this first issue, it was very kind of like a shock writing. Not and I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, it was fun, but it was just, it definitely grabs your attention. But it was really just like the spectacle of it.
well, it felt like it was almost written by someone who did not expect to be called back to be writing again. You know, they were going to get their worth out of this first issue because they may not get to finish the story. But just looking at some of this stuff, like, and taking into consideration how, I don't know, just how much craft goes into it. I mean, it's stuff like this full page spread. When you take it into consideration, an average comic book is touched by between 3 and 7 people before it makes it into the hands of the consumer.
Yeah.
Um, Tug's book, the case of the littlest umbrella. It's got an artist, it's got a writer, it's got a cover artist. I'm not sure if he's got a letterer, but there's so many people that usually go into a single comic book, and to think that this is the man's passion project and this is what he did. I mean, these issues came out months apart. They weren't even bi-monthly. I mean, there's 7 issues, and it took almost 3 years to get them all out.
Oh yeah, it's definitely impressive.
So I think that's something that's majorly respectable about it. And you look at the finite detail and like the border work of these books, like all the little faces and the words written in there, and just the
Hmm.
small messages and the extreme amounts of detail in every single panel. There's actually a joke about that near the end of the book. Um, but the extreme amount of detail in the line work and the inking and everything. The
Oh yeah.
little pop culture references on his T-shirt, and we're just into issue 1, but these are nuances that carry out throughout the entire series.
Yeah, and I love those little, like, tiny messages,
Right.
like in
Since
the corners of the panels.
right, moral lesson. Insert sound effect here.
This was made with 3D generated computer technology. How impressive is that?
um, one thing I do want to touch on in the first issue, and this is probably my favorite part of issue number 1, this full page spread, but he uh, he goes on a rampage and murders an entire cafe or taco stand full of people over the word wacky, because the word wacky just upsets him so badly that he has to go through a murderous rampage. Um,
With a spork.
with a What other weapon would you use?
I I just saying, it should be noted.
um, Now, just going through these books, like I said, there's a lot of little moments like this, and there's no way we're going to be able to cover all of them. So, I mean, just even preemptively, I would say if you had the opportunity to pick these up and look through them, I would definitely 100% suggest doing that, because if you want kind of a look at what a passion project, a work of love looks like, um, this is it, because
Oh
you
yeah.
you can see how much of this man's time he put into this as a whole. Like I said, even if it didn't come out but once every 6 months, I mean, it it's understandable because it was a fun ride from the beginning. Like, with the difference between something like this and the Magic the Gathering comics we tried to review last night is night and day. Um,
Oh yeah.
I feel like the artwork was probably more pleasant, if that makes sense. Not better, but more pleasant to look at in the Magic the Gathering books. but the storyline wasn't
Refined,
there.
maybe.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't think that was the purpose of this book. You know,
Right. It's
um,
very, very stylized.
well, this
It's
book,
it's almost like an art house movie, but in comic book forms.
right?
Is
This
kind of what I would equate it to.
that's a very astute. That's a very astute observation. I would give you that one. This to me, it feels like it's trying to encapsulate what it was like to grow up as a as a goth kid. You have that little voice inside your head that's just like, you know what? If I could just jam a pencil through someone's eye in Minecraft, that would be great.
Well,
And
back then it would have been in Super Mario 64.
no, man, it would have been in Warcraft, in Quake, in Half Life 2.
in in RuneScape.
Oh, yes. Morrowind. Anyway, we're showing our age. Um, let's let's continue on because, like I said, the story doesn't actually start to take form until issue 3. But out of everything, I think the first issue, the fourth and fifth issue, and the seventh issue were better than some of the rest of them. Even though I pretty much
I
just
don't.
labeled off the whole book, but
I don't know. I still think the first issue was great in the fact that it did exactly what it needed to do.
it gave you a feel for what you were getting into if you kept buying this title.
Exactly. And it drew you into what was going on, even though you had no idea what was going on.
Right. Um, and it like I said, it's all very stream of consciousness because, like you said, it's very wordy, but I think I think it really feels like something someone would be thinking to themselves when they ask themselves a question, or it's not day to day conversation because day to day exchanges are a sentence or two with a sentence or two in return, sometimes as low as one or two words back and forth.
Right.
These are well thought out philosophical statements that I have. I have two little girls that just refuse to go to bed. Give me one moment. If you want to start talking about issue 2 real quick.
Yeah. So issue 2 has probably one of my favorite exchanges between Johnny and one of his victims in the in the entire series. So you have him and this kind of straight-laced looking fellow tied up to a crazy looking contraption, and the gentleman just kind of starts having a pleasant conversation with him, asking him questions. Why are you doing this? He goes off, as you can see, on a long rant.
Right. Sorry, I'm back.
And, he's just like, oh, well, that's a interesting way of looking at it. But did you consider this? And it's just like wonderfully goofy how this guy's just calmly like, well, do you have to kill me? Are you sure? And definitely my favorite of the killings that he performs, I would say.
Oh yeah. I mean, they're just not going to go to bed. It's just not going to happen. Oh man. Um, no, he kind of goes through it, in a very roundabout fashion, and I think that his rationale is that he just can't stand people. And this is something that really resonates with the whole, goth kid community and the whole outcast, sensitivities of just the entire, I don't know, the entire culture of that back then. And it really, there's something I was going to wait until near the end to mention, but, you know, there's a web comic that I used to follow back when I first started following web comics, and it was called Wraith and Shine, and it was the story of two alternative kids that ran a bar and a disco. So it's got that same kind of feeling, and it also reminds me a lot of what is it, American Psycho with Christian Bale, the movie,
Ah, yeah,
because
I can see that.
I think that there's really an ambiguity to the story as to whether or not he's actually committing these murders or if he's just imagining and hallucinating everything.
Right.
So I'll just kind of flip through that
Yeah, that
again.
yeah, that was one thing that I really enjoyed is you weren't really sure what was reality and what was just in his mind through
Right,
most of the story.
right, and that's where I say it. It has a very Lovecraftian feel to it almost. Like it's just it's very surreal, and you have to and mixed with the stream of consciousness style of writing that I was talking about. Like I said, it's very just in your head. And that kind of comes to form later on in this issue, I believe. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's kind of one of the other things that it also reminded me of is like the Foamy the Squirrel cartoons and kind of those other like late 90s early 2000s like internet goth culture
Right,
sort of phenomenons.
right. And, you know, this one I think was a little bit of a progenitor. Like, I don't know that it was the first, and I definitely know that it had to take influence from other things, but it's so unique and so original in and of itself that I can't really see them. I can see where he got Invader Zim from this. Like you can see all the elements that he took away from this to move to Invader Zim.
Yeah. Oh,
But
definitely.
but it doesn't scream, oh, this guy read some Wolverine comics and wanted to make a goth version. The
Right.
concept was wholly original in my opinion. Now, if there's anybody out there that knows that there was a major influence that I'm unaware of, I'd love to hear about it and see it. But as far as I can tell from what I know, I don't see anybody else's work coming out of this.
Oh yeah, and by remind me, I meant in that nostalgic way, not necessarily that any cross influencing or anything, but it
Oh no, no.
just it's very nostalgic of that sort of uh, outsider culture from that time period.
Right. Um and again there oh well I will look at this I'm not going to look at all of the interlude comics, but a few of them I will I will pull up. This one just made me chuckle. We're introduced to a character that we'll come to find out whose name is Devi, Devi, Devi.
So, something.
It's devil without the L. But she's out on a date, and this guy is commenting on how amazing she is and everything like that. And it it all goes south because he really has to go to the bathroom. And rather than being a jerk, he exclaims that he has to go to the bathroom, and then eventually he just craps his pants, and he tries to hide it, and then in a shriek of sheer nervousness, he stands up and says, "Oh God, somebody just put shit in my pants." So that was pretty great.
yes, that was fantastic.
That was
I
just
also enjoyed the couple having dinner kind of next to him or whatever, saying, "Do you smell that? It smells like someone needs to change a diaper."
right. Um, we get another look into to Johnny, and the subtitle of this is "He's So Angry," but it gives you a kind of look into how he blows off steam, whether in his head or in real life. But he apparently is just ramping up and just kidnapping people and holding them hostage. Um, I do apologize. I'm gonna go have to quell the little one more time. I'll be right back again.
All right. So to let off some steam and relax himself, as you can see on the image to the right, uh, he likes to uh, basically an extreme form of woodshop class back in high school. And one thing that I love about this is the random circular saw just looks like he ninja started through somebody, which I'm not quite sure, and the also the samurai sword knife looking thing with a surprised face on it, which also, if one of the things, as we mentioned, kind of in the background, there's little things here and there. You see this same face, whether in that expression or smiling or something, and various things just randomly in the background of a lot of the pages.
What face are you talking about now?
On the samurai sword,
Oh yeah. Um,
yeah, it pops up quite a bit.
oh yeah. He does like emoticons all the time, and this is before emoticons were hugely popular because of smartphones. But yeah, there's one panel in a future episode or in a future issue where he does frowny faces all over the border of the entire book.
Now, as I was saying when you were gone, the circular saw blade, is that, I took that as he just like ninja started through that person.
I like to think that as well. Either that or he had some form of launcher. That would be nice.
Yeah.
I mean, he has some very intricate items, as we'll come to find out in issue 4. But just to kind of keep going through this one here, I've got one panel that I definitely want to pull up, but that's going to take just a second. Here we have, oh yeah, here we have the introduction of Mr. F and D Boy. These are styrofoam doughboys that are apparently personifications of the voices in Johnny's head.
Which is so fantastic.
Right. But this is him out on a date with Devi. Um, she works at a bookstore, and she becomes kind of a recurring character. Not terribly important to the story, but she is the only person that has shown Johnny true affection. so far since we've seen
Yeah.
this. So I think that's kind of important to note because Johnny doesn't have a lot of normal interaction. Pretty much any interaction he has with anyone leads to him killing them. So you got that going for you, which is nice. But
Yeah, there's somebody for everybody, as they say.
well, he had to let his styrofoam demonic doughboys screw it up for him because, as you can assume, he tries to kill Devi, and that does not bode well for him.
That will put a damper on a relationship.
Well, but there's just so much to unpack in these books. Like I said, it would be wrong of me to think that we could, actually cover the plot line of everything that's going on in these books. You're really gonna have to pick them up yourself if you like anything of what you're seeing. But that's something you should do.
Definitely. Now, are we coming up to the part about the wall yet?
Oh, about the wall. I believe it
Yeah.
has a mention in this issue. Is really where you
Okay.
kind of start to understand it. But if you want to go ahead and explain it, I mean, there's no problem than jumping around in plot. Like I said, to get through everything in these books, we'd be here for 6 hours, and that's just not going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. So we come to find out that he is killing all these people because he needs their blood, and
But not to drink it,
not to drink it, because he does not like bodily fluids.
and not to take a bath in it like certain politicians might do.
Allegedly in Minecraft. But to keep a wall in his house painted with blood, but the blood keeps drying and changing the wrong color, so he has to keep fresh blood almost constantly painted on to this wall. And that's kind of the driving force behind him killing all these people.
Well, and that's again, it plays into because when you're first introduced to it, it plays into the idea of him just being psychotic.
Yeah.
Again, it could be either or. He could just imagine it because that's the actual reveal that made me think of American Psycho the first time because the guy imagined himself killing like so many people and then there being so much blood, but when he actually went to show people and confess, there was no blood. So, it kind of made me think: does he just imagine that this wall has to stay coated in blood? I mean, it was kind of a mind screw to read through at first when you're thinking about it in those terms because I didn't know where it was going to end up. But
Right. Yeah. It's
I had no idea what direction this book was going to take me, but I was along for the ride.
and I kind of feel like I need to go to a psychiatrist after reading this book.
I mean, I would advise it absolutely. But you get again, and I think this has a lot to do with the. Oh yeah, this scene that I'm about to pull up may get our channel struck, and I apologize for that if that happens. But it just kind of shows you what you could do and say and get away with, and actually become heavily notable for in 1995. And then in 2019, if you put something like this out, you would have the FBI knocking on your door immediately. Because these 2 pages are Johnny basically going through and murdering everyone in the cafe except for a handful of people, and then telling these people to lament on the good things in your life because you never know how long you're going to have. And then they discover there's a bomb in a backpack and it blows the entire place up. And all of this because he was on his way to a nightclub to cause harm to a lot of people. And instead, he gets made fun of outside of the cafe, so he decides to reschedule the nightclub. Uh, Again, it made me very happy that this was written in the 90s because with recent events and, current geopolitical culture, man, you could not write something like this today and get it
Oh
published
no.
by anyone. But it's one of those treasures that I'm glad we have, and I hate myself for not actually looking into earlier because I also hate the fact that there are only 7 issues of this, and that it just gets more and more. From what I understand, it just gets more and more like toned down until you end up with Invader Zim.
Yeah, which I mean, Invader Zim was still fairly insane, not as graphic,
No, no, definitely not. But I believe that
but
was because they had licensing to worry about.
and it was on Nickelodeon. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So
Uh,
you can hire a fat pedophile with a foot fetish, but you know, don't show insane violence like this.
Speaking of pedophiles, um, Johnny is not a fan. You know, we have the
That
implication.
that means Johnny's alt right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think at one point he even does the OK sign in this comic,
Oh yeah.
so he was ahead of his time. But this little aside is, Johnny. Johnny has a very strange affiliation, or just love for Squee. I don't know what it is, but he protects Squee, and I don't know that I see. Do we
While
see him
also
harming?
traumatizing him.
Yeah, but what do you expect of a crazy person? Do we see
Right.
him harm kids directly? I don't think we do.
I
I mean,
I I
children are
don't think
harmed
so.
in this comic book, but I don't think we see Johnny
Well,
ever harming a kid. I could be wrong.
yeah, just when the like two gods or whatever take over the children's bodies in that offset story
Yeah, but
and beat the crap out of each other.
right. So Johnny in the main story, though, I don't think ever harms any children. So,
Yeah, I don't think so.
but he here we have an old man who is implied to be a pedophile who is taking Squee to quote unquote find his mommy, and they run into Johnny, and Johnny goes on a very, very long diatribe about how these are not good people. These people exist only so you should know how better you are than them. Which is again not a message you would be able to walk into with our current climate. So
Yeah,
again, it
especially cutting his hand off and then prying his head open and removing part of his brain.
right. Well, I mean, you have to see. You have to see
Well,
these things.
true.
But this is just one of the many instances that he protects Squee. I don't know if we skipped over it yet or not, but I do want to talk in part about my one of my favorite characters that we haven't focused on yet. And that'd be Nail
And
Bunny.
I was just gonna say it's got to be Nail Bunny because I love Nail Bunny as well.
So let's see, is he in this
Can we
particular?
mention
Yes,
can
there
we
he is.
mention real quick
Go ahead.
just again some of the weirdness of his writing. I just saw as you were flipping through that side story of the dude getting abducted by aliens and to
Oh yeah.
observe human mating rituals.
Yes, we can touch on that before we get into.
Because
Yeah,
that
we
was
can
just
we can touch on that one before we get into Nail Bunny. That's fine. Uh,
like
that,
I think I'm still processing what happened in that little aside.
well, a man found true love. So aliens abduct a man, and they say, we don't know anything about the human sexual reproduction. And he's like, but people have been abducted for years. And they're like, well, not by us. We're new to this area. We're just getting basic information. But we have to observe you having intercourse with a female. But we've picked an adequate one. We've picked a great mate for you. And they hand him a chicken. And he's like, but this is a chicken. And you're like, well, you'll either do it or we'll make you. And then he's just like, well, I guess, can we get some privacy? And it's implied that he definitely bangs the chicken. So they send him back home, and then the final panel is the guy sitting beside a chicken with several chickens with his nose. The only human factor on them are their eyes and nose, but and it's just like, and that's how I met your mother, which I think would have been a more fitting to How I Met Your Mother than what we
it
got.
would have been a more. That's true.
You just flash over to his kids and they're half chicken.
And just to point out, has nothing to do with the story. Never comes into play. It's just wonderfully strange.
Mrs. Church is in the chat now telling me that Debbie is the main character of the spinoff I Feel Sick. And when slave labor picked up Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, one of the only things that they had done at the time was some kind of fishing show. So, how you go from a fishing show to this, I don't think it's the same audience. I really don't see the same audience transitioning from Bassmasters to Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Yeah,
if they did,
that's a major change.
They're going to be some really extreme fishermen. Takes gutting to
very
a whole
extreme
new level.
Change in demographics.
We do briefly need to touch on these guys. Basically, it's your typical band asshole. Your band guy asshole, and these characters actually become important when the story begins to gather a little more cohesion. But the dude,
and not your typical band asshole, your typical like goth indie band asshole.
Yeah, they're just looking. Those people that are just looking for reasons to hate things. Like they don't want a reason to draw an opinion on it. They want a reason to hate it.
Yes. But, and I just love that. Man, I saw 9 Inch Heels.
Yeah.
When they were still playing in clubs before they got big. Now it's all blah blah, whatever he ends up saying.
And they're walking out of a Kafka movie talking about how they were like, this is garbage, and they kept kicking the seat of the guy in front of him. So obviously Johnny doesn't appreciate that because it was his seat. So he kidnaps them and hooks them up to electronic devices. And you don't see him again for an issue or two. But what you do see is a transition in the main titling of the next little mini story with Johnny in it, and they're calling him Johnny the Suicidal Maniac. I believe they've done this in issue 2 as well, but anytime you start to see the little doughboy men, they're trying to get Johnny to kill himself for some reason. And again, you have no idea why. This wasn't introduction in any way, shape, or form, but it does have a payoff. So this is, I think this is actually where you can start to say that the story actually starts to really come together and into the vision that he wanted it to be. But
you mean an actual story?
Shut up. You just didn't understand art. But then we're introduced to my favorite character in the book. I think is Nail Bunny. Um, Nail Bunny is the dead bunny that has been nailed to the wall that talks to Johnny as well. But it doesn't like the Doughboys. It thinks the Doughboys are trying to plot on and manipulate Johnny, even though supposedly they're all in his head. So,
Yes, and well, he's a bunny that he bought from a pet store, fed him once, and then nailed him to a wall.
right.
Yeah, gotta get the whole backstory of Nail
Well,
Bunny.
yes,
It's
yes,
important.
yes. Now, one thing I will touch on that we haven't said much about at this point is that you have, at the end of all of these issues, you have a panel that just says "Dear Diary," and it just closes out the book. It's the last page of the book, and it's usually a full page spread with just a lot of stream of consciousness. But just look at the beautiful shading in this work.
Oh yeah, he's an amazing artist.
Right. So I do miss, like, I do hate that I missed out on this era and that this didn't continue, because I believe there's some animosity about the amount of work he kept into his own books and his own properties, because this thing blew up so quickly. Because I remember seeing, I think that was part of the reason that I was a little, because I'll admit it, I was a hipster church. If something got popular, I was not going to go out of my way to latch onto it. And as soon as I started seeing these T-shirts floating around before I ever even heard it was a comic book, I was like, "There's no way it could be good." But as an older person, I'm realizing more and more that it's usually only stuff with at least some merit that gets picked up for merchandising like
Right.
that. But you had to understand, man, you were a poser if you shopped at Hot Topics.
Oh,
uh,
hot topic.
I think Becky fired you.
Yeah, she did. No, Becky, you do not get the job.
But that closes up issue 3, and believe it or not, we're still just getting to the halfway point of this epic. Um,
And yes, this is listening to us try and go through it is what it's like reading it.
and it's all clip notes
You,
too. Like there's really, there's no explaining this story in any real cohesive manner. But
right.
you know, in the ongoing struggles of issue 3, Nail Bunny has now just become Bunny Head, and that's fantastic, because in his imagination or in real life, one or the other, Johnny has a
Yeah, we're still not sure.
floating dead rabbit head following him along, keeping him company.
I
That
mean,
is
don't we all want that?
Well, that is also self-aware. But if you'll notice in the bottom panel that I've got pulled up, you see how many victims he's amassing at once now, because this whole story has been kind of a story of escalation, an escalation of his insanity, an escalation of his bloodlust and his annoyance with people, an escalation figuratively of his depression and manic drives, and more and more people are shown being captured in this house, and you start to realize that, okay, he either lives in a tesseract, or, like he explains here, that he discovered that there were a large underground system underneath his house, and he has no idea how deep it actually goes. So this where
And there's also a tunnel that connects his house to Squeeze house.
we learned that near the end. But yeah, Um, so that's a lot of plot device, I think, but I think this is where a lot more of the Lovecraftian ideas come in because we had no need to know these things, and we're learning them in real time with Johnny, supposedly. So,
Right.
but he doesn't make an extra special effort to explain anything like some characters do. With all of this information, is still just his thought process and how he's conversing essentially with himself. He's not explaining anything to anyone, and it would be weird if he was. He wouldn't be explaining to the rabbit something that he had just figured out for himself because he already knows it. He's trying to puzzle
Right.
something out the whole time. Um, just don't ask me what it was. you know, um, but I wanted to pull this up to also take a mention that he never does his titling the same way. Like he never gets lazy and does template titling.
Right.
So that's
And it's different for each like mini story in each issue too, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, he'll use some of the same like I don't know elements, but they're always freshly drawn. Um,
Yeah.
he here's where he mentions the tunnel next to Squeeze House, where he comes over
Oh, okay.
for a band-aid, I believe, because he cut his hand on a can of SpaghettiOs. But this left page here is where he is explaining the blood wall to the girlfriend of the douchebag from the concert, and he's explaining that the what's it say here? Just another room in the world, and he's essentially kind of keeping it painted red with the blood of the victims because there's something on the other side that he doesn't want to get loose. And again, at this point, he's just insane. Like this is the thought process of a crazy person. You have no idea what's coming. But
and he's wonderfully insane.
for those interested in keeping up, um, Mrs. Church has told me that the young chapel is officially down. Um, so hopefully we will not have to continue this ongoing battle. As soon as I say that, though, she's going to be up and coming right for me. She's trying to take over the show. She's trying to take over the show, fire us, and hire Becky. This is all Becky's fault.
Yeah.
We
It's
bl-
a long game.
yeah.
Becky's playing 3D chess with one of the chapels.
Yeah, that's why she wants Peeps all the time. She's bribing my 2-year-old with Peeps and keeping her up all night. And then using her to exhaust me so that I'll be out of the picture and then she and the chapel can take over the show. Well, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
We're not going to
Yeah.
be reviewing
And
Looney Tunes comics. uh, but I will keep you in mind if I have to fire it for real. Once I have to fire you for real, she's not going to want the job. She'll have been spurned.
exactly.
But no, this is where the story starts to kind of to gel together, and essentially at the end of it, you come back.
As much as it can.
Well, this issue is really the issue where it kind of kicks off as a cohesive storyline because this is the one where you get not only a recurring sense of the victim from the concert, but you also get the girl that was on the date with Johnny that he tried to kill. You know what I'm talking about?
No, yeah.
Debbie?
Now, do we want to talk about that PSA real quick?
Oh, okay. The PSA. Yeah, we can talk about the. We'll briefly mention the PSA. Um,
I mean, we might as well highlight at least one of each of these side stories just because
r-
they're fun.
right. Well, the public service announcement. This particular one is you shouldn't run away from home or do drugs because you'll end up a freakish addict man baby troll thing.
Whose
Uh,
eye pops out.
drugs won't help things. They'll only turn you into a hideous little freak troll baby with exploding eyeballs. Which, I mean, they're good words to live by. Should
Yeah,
definitely
and
not inject expired sour cream from Taco Hell.
or snort homeless vomit.
No, definitely not. No homeless vomit. No junkie urine. But
Well, apparently now Becky and Mrs. Church are conspiring to take over the show.
what?
And that's what they're saying in the chat. Hey, no conspiracies in the chat now.
Yeah, I can't have this. They're mods too, though. They can de-wrench us. They're just gonna take the channel. I mean, I'll
Hey,
just.
I'm not even a mod in your chat. What the hell?
Oh, well, that's because you weren't in the chat. Where you at? There you are. I'll give you a wrench, I suppose. I mean, Becky's just gonna take it from
Yeah.
you. But like I said, you get a recurring skit with the the girl that he was on a date with, and you get a lot of interesting sound effects when he calls in. So he calls her back or whatever. She calls him to see if he's at home, and on the other line, you get a whiz, a blam, a whump, an IE, and a eek. And she immediately hangs up the phone. And you can imagine at Johnny's house, that just means he's probably killing a bunch of people, but you'd be surprised.
Yeah. Like, oh, we forgot to mention his doorbell
Right. But,
from the first issue. Is a bunch of electrodes attached to some dude that electrocutes him if someone rings his doorbell. So
or
he screams.
turns on his blender, or
Or
starts
the
the air.
toaster, or flushes the
Right,
toilet.
right. But the uh, the final Johnny the Suicidal Maniac that we get is because this is the end of that particular mini series, I guess you would call it. But he's got a robotic arm hooked up to a pistol that has a motion sensor. Excuse me, has a motion sensor and is wired into the phone so that whenever he speaks into it, it'll blow his brains out. But nobody ever calls him, so what's there to worry about? And just like you would expect, it does not end well.
Because why would it?
He gets a call from the girl that he was on the date with, and then we get this issue's Dear Diary. Dear Diary, I seem to be dead. And then you have the little bunny head next to him as well, also dead. But it was dead from the
Still
beginning, I
dead.
suppose. Yeah. But this is only after he realizes that excuse me, I didn't take my churchly nap today. Um, but this is only after he gets into a physical altercation with his Doughboy inspired sentient thought puppets, because he goes on screaming, "I control me! I control me!" And then the phone rings, and he picks up the phone and he says hello, and dies. Because it was pointed out earlier in the comic that there seems to be some kind of force watching over him, keeping him from getting caught by the police or seemingly making it impossible for him to die.
Right,
Uh,
like he goes into like a 7-Eleven type store to get a slushie, but the machine's already turned off, and he goes to threaten the clerk with the gun behind the counter, and so he says he's going to shoot the clerk and then himself, and he shoots the clerk and then points the gun at himself, and there was only one bullet in it.
yeah, like
Which
what's the point of that? So issue 5 starts out and Johnny's dead. So this is, like I said, issue 4 is really where I think the storyline started to become more cohesive. But issue 5 starts out and you get a flashback to the girl from the douchebag at the concert that was kidnapped with him. And another one of Johnny's victims climbs up out of the floor. They have no idea how far down underground they are, but the whole house is starting to fall apart. And nobody knows why, except for the, I don't know, the little doughboy guys.
yeah.
And can I just say that I love those little fuckers?
They're great characters.
But the doughboy guys are talking about how their master doesn't like that they've gained sentience and tried to defy him, and one of them is all willing to just remerge with the master, and the other one wants to maintain freedom. You have no idea what the hell they're talking about, and then this happens. You get tentacles, and that's when I realized that this was a guy who had read some Lovecraft. He either was really into hentai or read some Lovecraft. And
Why not both?
well, I mean, I'm pretty sure. Although hentai wasn't really huge in the 90s.
True.
Anyway, moving on. The douchebag from the concert is eviscerated by this tentacle monster, and the other two, I guess, main characters at this point, they decide that it's probably best to get the fuck out of Dodge. And
What a wise choice, I would say.
right, so they're running from this monstrosity, and that's pretty much this whole issue as far as their arc goes. They hate each other, by the way, because the girl is just like, every man in this area is a complete and utter dickbag, and you know,
And the guy is a complete and utter dickbag.
right, proving the point.
So
But they run into the doughboys who are still sentient, even though Johnny is supposedly. Well, we find out he's not quite dead.
I'm not quite dead.
Right. He's still having a little bit of cognizant thought, but not much. And the dickhead from the previous panels sticks around to finish him off, even though that just wastes time. But Bunny's back in play. Bunny's attached to the monster now, so that made me happy. I like to think that the monster was Bunny the whole time.
That's your head canon.
I really like the bunny. I didn't know I was gonna like the
Me
bunny as much
too.
as I did, but the bunny was really good. But yeah, the uh, the asshole that was running with the chick, gets caught by the monster, and the chick survives. So that's you got that going for you. I think this is the last we see of her. Is
Yeah, I
this
believe so.
is this issue, and then there's a formatting change. It's slight, but there is a formatting change in the next two issues. Um, we'll finish this one out real quick. We're pretty much at the end of it, but there's a formatting change in the last two issues of the book, but we get kind of a just a final shot of what the world's like now that Johnny's been killed. And instead of a Dear Diary in this one, because Johnny's dead, we just get kind of a I don't know, an internal monologue of the monster. Maybe
Was
just
that
a
what it was?
I don't know. Like I said, this is very stream of consciousness. So I don't know if this is just the writer's thoughts on it. I don't know if this is the internal monologue of the monster. This could be the two doughboys' stream of consciousness. We don't really know, but it's creepy as hell. And it's not
Oh
written
yeah,
in Johnny's text. And that's something you got to realize is that everything has a different text style, so that matters.
true.
But from what we see, the house is in orbit, and Johnny is floating through space on a plaque of floorboards, and the monster is having its way with the asshole that escaped from the house and ripped him in half. So,
Which I was glad about.
yeah, I mean, he needed to die. That's what the girl came to the conclusion of, too, is that apparently most people in this house deserve to die.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I'll probably have to say that issue 6, the next issue, is my favorite of the series. Just because of the themes that they explore um, with Johnny dead. What did you think about it?
I thought it was fun. It was definitely interesting. I really love the cover. I just want to point that out
I'll pull that up
as
in just a second.
you're pulling that up.
Right.
Yeah, we also didn't mention that he tells everyone to call him Nee.
Yeah. That's his thing. He goes by NNY, knee, pronounced the same way as the KNEE. But yeah, that's if he likes you, he tells you to call him knee.
Yes, if he likes you.
Even his victims. If he doesn't particularly think you deserve to die, but he needs to kill you for his wall, he'll tell you to call him Nick. Say it's nice
Yeah,
to meet you, accept your apology. He's still gonna murder you. Um, and then the recurring symbols again. You had the emojis on the cover of the tombstone. Do you see those?
and in the uh, entrance sign to heaven as well.
Oh yeah. So like I said, this guy had a thing for emojis before emojis were a thing. We should actually all thank Jonan Vasquez for emojis.
We should.
Um, Maybe not the most recent ones. I don't think he'd take credit for that. But again, like I just it always just makes me happy when I look through these again because, you know, like I said, with the text on the word Johnny the Homicidal Maniac or JTHM, he never reuses stuff. Um, I'll have to look at the covers, but he does the covers himself too. Um, but
Yeah,
I'll have
which is pretty. It's amazing that he did all of it.
right. That again that sets it up like that gets at some courtesy points in situations where it would normally get a lot of critique because at putting something like this out and doing it all yourself and you know being happy enough to get 7 issues out of everything being your own work without throwing it in the trash can, I don't know that I could do that. you know it you know how people are their own worst critics, but I can't
Right.
imagine getting through this entire process and liking everything that I had done to a point that I would feel like it was good enough for public consumption. To have the the gall to do that, to have the separation from it, to be ready to have it criticized by people and stand side by side against comics that have been around for 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
But he gets into heaven, and he's immediately told he doesn't need, like, he's not supposed to be there. And
And
we
given a band-aid to fix his gunshot to the head wound.
right, and it works because that's what heaven is. But he's he encounters God in heaven. That's a thing. Oh, let's talk about the reaction to what he's done before
Yeah,
before
that part was great.
yeah. So the gatekeeper of heaven, so to speak, basically looks at him and says, "Let's look at what you've done and figure out where you need to be." Oh my. Oh dear God, no. Mighty Christ, why? Holy Lord, I'm going to be sick. And then he's actually sick, so he's just like, I'm just gonna go. And then he finds God, and God is adorable, but he won't answer your questions. He's just like, I created the universe. I'm gonna take a nap. And Johnny's just like, that was billions of years ago. Like, why are you? He just goes on this tirade, and he's just like, well, my bad. I just created the universe. I guess I should be out taking laps. And then goes back to sleep.
And I love how his line on some weird walking robot thing with an intercom that just shushes you when you talk to him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, why not?
I kind of want one. I want one.
It. I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's safe to say that this is a very atheist description of heaven. I would be willing to say that at bare minimum, Jonan Vasquez is an agnostic, if not an atheist. Um,
I would agree with that.
and we can't go on without touching on the moment that Johnny is the happiest he is ever going to be in the comics. And that's when he finds out that while he's in heaven, he could focus on somebody and make their head explode. And even though his tour guide in heaven tries to get him not to do it, he can't contain himself, and he just keeps making this guy's head explode until the guy makes his head explode. Because in heaven, injuries all heal themselves. They're just mildly annoying.
And everybody in heaven has the ability to explode somebody's head.
Right, until a nun comes in, or is it a nun?
Yeah, it's a nun.
until a nun comes in and basically tells them all to just knock it off. And then we get a little. This is probably one of my more favorite meanwhiles, so we'll touch on it real quick. But this is a story about Jonan Vasquez. This is a very self-aware story. He even makes mention that there are some exaggerations, like in this panel where he's flying across the moon out the roof of his house. The moon was not full that evening. And he too is in the quest of an icy, and he too is let down, much to the chagrin of the shop owner. But he hit the shop owner with a laser beam after finding out that the shop owner is the devil, and then demands that the devil turn the Slurpee machine back on. He then averts the Pope from being abducted by aliens, and makes it back home. Just in time enough to pick up the phone and tell somebody they have the wrong number.
And one thing I want to point out with this one especially is, so his art is typically very stylized. Like, I immediately recognized it when I started reading.
Right.
But he's also just in general a very talented artist, because this is in a much different style than the majority of his work.
Right.
And I just wanted to point out just how good of an artist he actually is.
Right. And I think that again that has to do with the different stories that he's telling because every miniseries has its own stylization.
Yeah.
Then the meanwhile
I mean, you can
fluctuates.
still tell it's him, like with the shading and like the like kind of like the eye shapes and stuff like that. But it's still different between all of them, and
Right.
I enjoyed that.
Absolutely. Like I said, the art by and large wins me over in these books, and I didn't think I was gonna like it. Like I'll be completely honest, I was prepared to not like this book when I started reading it.
Ooh.
I mean, being honest, but the Johnny also meets the devil. When he's sent down to hell, and you know finds out that hell is a lot like the real world. So you got that going for you. Also,
And
travel is unexpected and instantaneous in heaven and hell. But you see the McDonald's logo in the background of this right page panel here. So there's a McDonald's in hell. I believe there's also a Taco Bell in heaven.
which makes sense.
But the devil basically
You know,
equates. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say theologically speaking.
Yeah. Well. Um. Oh, Mrs. Church in the chat says he did the art for the special edition album of IF by Mindless Self Indulgence (MSI). So that's a thing. Um,
Cool.
yeah, he's apparently done a lot. Like Jonan Vasquez is apparently just extremely talented. Uh, if I'm not mistaken, he did music as well, but I don't know if that ever went anywhere. I could be completely wrong about that. Just be thinking about the art that he's done for music.
Hmm.
But yeah, the devil basically explained to Johnny that he has no place in hell either, and
Because he can't do anything with his soul.
right, right, and just equates him to a flesher, and the devil's like, yeah, and Johnny replies, shit. The devil's like, exactly, you get it. But again, like just the interactions, like the nonchalantness of meeting God and the devil, that just cracked me right the fuck up. But at this point,
Now, are you going to bring up the bagel scene?
yes, yes, we'll
Okay.
we'll talk about the bagel scene. Let's see, where am I? Right here. Yep.
That
Nobody
was
in
my favorite part from hell.
the coat was my favorite part. Um,
They're pretty close up there.
but he finds a coat that he really likes, so he just steals it. And
Because money is a thing in hell.
right, and the devil has nothing to do with it. People are just shitty people in hell, like you would expect. But not like it's not like a lot of people would expect. Like if you're just mediocrely shitty, like just awful to people about 50 cents worth of cream cheese, you go to hell. Because this guy is like forsaken over 50 cents worth of cream cheese. Pretty fantastic. And then he gets hit by a car. And Johnny's like, that was a pretty great bagel.
And apparently he does it every. And apparently that guy does that almost every single day.
Right. Why wouldn't you? But he meets a whole cast of characters, and then the devil comes back as a cheerleader because Johnny wasn't distraught enough by his original appearance. And he's like, well, "We're gonna send you back to life." And Johnny's like, "Well, do I at least get to keep the coat? I mean, it fits perfectly, and this lining is fantastic." The devil's like, "No, it'll be pretty painless. I mean, it's probably the most excruciating thing you'll ever endure, and you're probably gonna lose a lot of hair, but it should be fine." And then the devil's left alone with just the people in hell, and you can see a little disappointment in that because I believe the devil actually liked having Johnny around, Senior Satan, as
Yes.
they prefer to be called. And then we have the Dear Diary. I don't know why I just did that. That was dumb. We had the Dear Diary for Johnny, and once he's finally come back to life, and he did lose most of his hair.
Yeah.
And I think that this is kind of where we first start to get a little inspiration for Zim.
Yeah, I definitely saw it in this.
So let me fix my screw up here because boomer level. But so he's back to life now, and apparently his house is destroyed, but back on Earth, I guess. Not really explained, but yeah, I think he draws the word Johnny for differently, like in the same vein, but differently for every book. Um,
Yeah, like slightly different
but
seems.
yeah, this I feel like is almost a what is it? Cenobite. It's the Hellraiser series.
Hmm.
The cover reminds me of the Hellraiser series with the hooks and the stretched mouth and stuff like that. The big goggles. Did you ever see the Hellraiser movies?
I did not.
You're,
I know of them.
you know what this means, huh?
I know.
Yeah, you know what this means. You're fired.
Yeah. Took longer this episode.
Well, but anyway, we open up the seventh issue with the story of Jimmy. Um, Jimmy goes by Me, MMY, and is an impersonator of Johnny. And as you can guess, Johnny's not a big fan of that.
And we should also backtrack real quick.
Go ahead.
Um, uh, Devi, uh, is it Devi that asked him about if he was the one who killed and molested a girl behind the mall or something like that?
Yes, yes, but it was
And
Jimmy.
yes, but he's like, no, I would never do that. That's horrible.
Well, I would never do that. I hate touching people.
Oh yeah, that's what it was.
I don't want to be touched. I don't want to touch anyone. Killing them is for the blood for the wall. Except for this guy because he soiled Johnny's bad name and has horrible taste. Um, yeah, the lesson number one would be a better judge of character. Second, just because we're similar doesn't mean I like you or you'll like me. But Yeah, it's kind of a sad ending of that particular little arc because he explains that he just doesn't like himself very much, even though he is in complete control of his own sentience again. It seems like the monster behind the wall has been quelled somewhat and no longer has control of them at this point, but that changes a little bit later on.
Yeah. And just to mention, I like that he smashes the dude's dick with a hammer.
Yes, well, you did bad things with it. But he does try to send a heartfelt apology to Devi. You know, the whole I wasn't myself, but I understand. I apologize, and she just does not. She doesn't take it. She blesses him for everything that he's worth over the phone. But I think it's good for her as far as a closure moment
Hmm.
because she finally gets to be like, "You fucking bastard." Alternative chick, yes.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Mrs. Church
No,
corrected us.
no, the one that he called, that's not the alternative chick. No, the one that he called in this issue was Debbie.
No, I think she's talking about the one he was talking to about Jimmy
Oh, right, right,
murdering and
right,
molesting the
right.
girl.
Yeah, that was the alternative chick. You're right. Um, yeah, we're jumping around so much, I didn't remember exactly who it was, but no. But yeah, he gives her a call and tries to give her some closure, but it doesn't go as well as expected. And I think this is very telling because this kind of all cycles back into this guy's style of writing. It's not a feel good story. You know, I
Oh
don't
no.
I don't think he ever intended to write Johnny as quote unquote the protagonist of a book. And it's very
I
interesting.
mean, did anybody like really expect it to be a feel good story?
Well, I mean, he came back from heaven and hell. He killed his impersonator. I'll pull up the anguish panel here before we get back to the final part of the Johnny story where yeah, there's the anguish. She's another character that exists in the same universe as Johnny, but is not really associated with him. At least not at this point. I don't know if at a later point down the road she becomes more important. But you see that she has the 9-inch heels poster on her wall. And it's little stuff like that. Like I believe that's yeah. They mentioned the Crow a couple of times. It doesn't seem like Jonan Vasquez thinks very highly of the Crow.
Oh yeah.
Um, which would be my main critique of this book, if anything, because like any person that was a kid back then, I loved the Crow, and it does not seem that he holds it in high regards. But I do understand. But we we come into the final part, and now we have a new stream of consciousness character, and that is the the talking burger character. I didn't
Who
like
was
him as
also
much as the
fun.
bunny. I didn't like him as much as the bunny.
Well, no, he's not as good as the bunny, but he was still fun.
Yeah, but he he talks about he talks to this guy and tries to puzzle out whether he's in his head or he's trying to control him. and you get a brief shot of Nail Bunny in a photograph here, and I believe Nail Bunny is still talking to him somehow. We get another shot of a cockroach in the house, which was a previous story mention, and you realize that Johnny's still basically insane, and I think I think this is where he pretty much decides that he's got to get the hell out of this house and away from this thing because he's he's talking about how he needs his freedom, and the burger figurine is just like there's no such thing. And Johnny's like, I'm a slave to nothing. A little burger eating, what is it? Burger eating kind of meaty guy, nothing. But all in all, like this is pretty much where it comes to the end of the actual story because we interact with Squee one more time after this, and oh oh yeah, that's a good one. I'll see if I can pull that up sideways again. But Johnny, Johnny pays Squee one more visit and hits his dad in the back of the head because his dad comes to investigate who's in his son's room like a good parent would. But
But
yeah,
goes on to tell him how much he hates that he has a kid.
right. So Johnny just clocks him one in the back of the head and says goodbye. Tells him to take care of himself, and the kid finally drifts off to sleep, and then has this horrendous fucking dream, apparently. And then it all just kind of goes poof, and he wakes up terrified in his bed. And that's I believe that's kind of an insight into how screwed this kid is from being around Johnny. But I do know that Squee is a character that comes back for a future series. So, um, and we get a final shot of Johnny sitting on a cliff, and this is pretty much his goodbye. Oh, Mrs. Church says probably because it was cliche to like the crow when you were a goth kid back then. Yeah, Squee got a spinoff, but Johnny's final scene was sitting on the edge of the cliff and writing in his diary, and says that he hopes that he will eventually be as cold as the moonlight that touches the diary's pages. Very poetic way to end the series. But all in all, this was a really fun ride of comic books that I did not expect, especially after the first issue, because usually with a story like the way this opened up, it never evolves into a cohesive story.
Yeah.
But the fact that this did, it actually made me really happy, as ridiculous as that story was. you know,
Yeah. Yeah, when I got through the first issue, I was like, "Holy crap! There's 6 more. What are they even gonna do with this?"
right. They can't just kill people for 6 issues because that'll get boring. But then we were proven
Right.
wrong. They can kill people for 6 more issues and keep it entertaining. So, solid, a solid 3.5, 4 out of 5 book. I would definitely say it's above average. And for a first work, that definitely sets it above expectations because this is something that you're just not going to get these days. Like
Right.
this is like I said, everything I said about this in the beginning stands true. This is a passion project. This is something that people just don't do anymore. Like you don't get a full comic book full of this level of detail. Like I think with Comicsgate, some of the titles that are coming from that have that level of love in it. But from Marvel or DC or even Dynamite or any of these other larger publishers, you don't get these kind of projects because they're so heavily regulated with editorial and being
Mm-hmm.
multiple people's vision and having to stick to a license or something like that. Um, Mrs. Church is saying she told me he didn't know where he was going when he started,
Hmm.
so he probably didn't figure it out until about halfway through himself. I mean that makes sense, but again,
It definitely
they
does.
well, like I said, the book itself was very stream of consciousness. It was very like it wasn't scripted. It doesn't feel like he it literally feels like he just kind of went on diatribes and wrote down what he was thinking.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, a lot of people can identify with the way this guy thought, especially in those days. But I think the interesting thing to take away is, like we were talking about before, his initial vision of his form of entertainment was people should be able to separate entertainment from real life and not take it seriously. And then
Right.
eventually he became the person that pulled Invader Zim because of the influence it had on a younger audience. So, just the evolution of him as a person and how he went and how, it very well could have been just social pressure changing because in the 90s you could put stuff like this out and people would blame the parents for buying it for little kids. But nowadays, no, you
Right.
can't. Like, you have to blame the creator for putting it out in a medium that a child might be able to acquire. I mean, it's a very ridiculous outlook, but it also hinders the ability of creators to put stuff like this out. And that is the real tragedy of it all.
Yeah, and that line about how it's all entertainment and whatnot. I mean, that's kind of the basis for this entire show is, hey, comic books are meant to be entertainment, not push social agendas or
Well, comic
issues,
books,
anything like
music,
that.
movies, all
These
of it.
yeah, yeah, it's just entertainment. It's not a story about some dude going on a massive killing spree in no way affects the rest what's going on in the world or your life. Just enjoy the craziness of the story.
Right. And, if you don't, then stop reading it. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that pretty much wraps up this. After reading this, would you be, oh, wow. A friend of mine from high school got these books, and her mom went through all of them and sharpied out all of the bad words. That's from Mrs. Church in the chat there. Oh man, that's was there anything left to read or look at when she got done? I mean, after reading this, I don't know that you could actually follow the story after you took out all the bad words. um, but would you would you be interested in looking at some of the spin-off titles for this, like Squee or what was the other one?
Oh, most definitely. I would love to read the Squeeze spinoff
Okay.
story.
All right, we'll put that on the cards for another time. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would, and I would definitely suggest it for anybody that likes like I said, a horror kind of feel with a little bit of Lovecraft and a little bit of American Psycho and a little bit of the origin of Invader Zim. It's definitely worth.
And a little bit of just general batshit insanity.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of that actually, not just a little bit. I Feel Sick was the other one. So yeah, there's a couple of spin-offs we can look at, just depending on the length of them. But we'll
Yeah,
definitely put that in the list for going later. Um, next week,
got it on it.
if we can get Becky and Jesse on a on a show at some point, if they're not busy, I may see if we can get the Lock and Key series for number 5 and 6, like we were originally going to do today.
Yeah,
But if not, I know we also have the top 10 Marvel and DC crossovers that we're going to be looking at.
that is correct.
So we will keep you guys informed once we know what's going on. But you have any final thoughts on this book?
Uh, no, just I'm good. Uh, just because of the passion project aspect and that he did all of it himself and that
Yeah,
it came out good. I have to add that extra little props in there
right. No,
to it.
I definitely, like I said, that's definitely giving it some points in my regard because again, if this was something that was written and drawn and colored and shaded and inked and penciled by like 6 different people, you would never come out with this. Um,
Right.
so you kind of have to look at it in that light. If it's not your thing, I totally understand that because it is very violent, it is very gory, uh, but at the same time, there is a story that comes together from all of it, and it is kind of a look into where a lot of the future content that many, many more people knew about, like Invader Zim, I would venture to say, was infinitely more popular than this was at conception and launch. Possibly because of the fame that Jonan Vasquez had acquired because of this, but also because it was a cartoon that they targeted toward children.
Right.
So, and I think Becky's saying that they will be there on next weekend for Lock and Key. So, but if everything goes well, then we will do that next weekend, either Saturday or Sunday. And then
All right.
Becky's coming on to Fire You, so that'll be good. But yeah, check out
Hey,
check out Johnny the Homicidal Maniac and the
and
Squee spinoff.
have your therapist on speed dial.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But don't tell them that the book made you want to do things. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming out. Thanks everybody in chat, Becky, Mrs. Churd, Denny, um, everybody for stopping by and viewing, liking, subscribing, all of that nonsense. Until next time, we will see you again.
Good night, everybody.